Hello?
Hello.
Hi, how's it going?
Hi. Great. How are you?
I'm doing great. Thank you for taking the time to do this interview. I'm very excited to be able to talk to you about the brand new album Titanic Mass, which is available now. How did it come about writing the new album?
I guess just like writing any of our albums, we felt like writing some more music and continuing our journey, basically. And we started writing this album basically right after we finished recording of Renatus, the last album. And I guess we felt that we had a couple of months, or at least a month before we had anything to do, so we decided to put some things together and really start working on some new material right after the recording. And then we picked it up sometime early 2015, if I remember correctly.
Oh, very cool. And yeah, I mean, the last album was like a monumental change for the band because you hadn't necessarily done that style before, and now with Titanic Mass, it's kind of a continuation of discovering this new style that you guys have been playing. How does it feel going back and listening and playing the old stuff as compared to the new stuff that you guys are playing?
I have nothing. I really like our earlier stuff as well. Even though we have done a considerable change in our sound, I still appreciate our earlier albums for what they are, and I still enjoy listening to them a lot. And it's also very much has been a learning experience for us. I mean, when we started writing the first album, we were 19, 20 years old, and it's a long time ago, and you've learned a lot since then, and you're using all those things that you've learned when you write songs today. And so listening back is like it's always fun because you see where you were at that time. Yeah.
So how do you feel you've changed the most since the beginning of the band?
First off, I think we've all become adults. So, I mean, we were basically teenagers when we started out, so a lot of things has definitely changed over the years. But you grow as a musician, you grow as a person, just natural, I think.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, I mean, being a fan of the older material and absolutely loving what you guys have been doing on Titanic Mass and, of course, the previous album as well, I love seeing that kind of diversity in a band, not being afraid to explore other styles of music as long as it feels natural to the band.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what we were thinking about when we did this change, or whatever you want to call it, is that there aren't a lot of bands who would dare to try something like that, and we've just felt like, why not? I mean, we've started to feel the limitations of the style that we did on the previous albums, and we wanted to try something new to keep things fresh for us. And when we talked about it, it's just like, why not do it? I mean, what's stopping us, really? And I think it would be exciting. I mean, of course, really big bands cannot per se do this change. It would piss too many fans off, I suppose. But I would like to see. I always love to see band really being adventurous and trying on different things and not really repeating themselves too much. So yeah, I just think it's a cool thing to try out different styles and see whatever is your kind of what you're the best at, basically.
Oh, absolutely. And of course there are some bands that are very comfortable playing the same style, keeping the same formula album after album, changing little things here and there. But it always shows a lot about a musician who's willing to take risks and play other styles that they didn't necessarily start with or possibly even known for at the time, and be able to show the diversity of the musician to be able to stay inspired and keep that creativity going.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it's a huge step. I mean, for us, it was a style of music that was a lot more technical and a lot more difficult to play. So everybody in the band had to learn this new stuff, but we were all up for it, and that's how we've always been as musicians. A challenge is something that should be embraced. At least that's our philosophy. And as long as bands don't get stale, and if you get bored with whatever you do, you should try to change it. That's my opinion, and do something that inspires you.
Oh, very much so. When this change happened with the band, for you personally, how much easier or harder was it for you to start doing this style as compared to how it was in the beginning?
I think I've always, with every album, I've upped the difficulty. For some reason, I just do that without even planning to do it. I just somehow managed to make it more difficult for me with every release. But it was definitely a bigger step up in difficulty for the Renatus album, and because the music is so energetic and the vocals are really conveying that energy. It's there aren't many breathing pauses for a singer in those songs. They're really melodically they're all over the place, and you have these very complex melodies and demanding melodies. So that was definitely a step up, even more so in difficulty than before.
And how does that translate into a live setting, being able to do the songs off the last two albums?
Well, you just have to practice your muscles a bit more, I suppose. Once you've learned it, you just have to get used to it, get your body used to singing those songs, and it takes a little while getting used to. But after that, I think it isn't. I've had to become a better singer to be able to do it, basically. So now it's almost as difficult as it was for me to sing the old songs back in those days.
Oh,
so it's really more about getting your chops up and raising your level.
Oh, that definitely makes sense. So when it comes to the lyrics of the new album, what kept you inspired and writing for the new album?
Well, I think it's the same as it always is when you write lyrics. It's something that goes on, whatever goes on in your life or in the world in general, that inspires you to write something. And I also try not to complicate things too much, because I have a tendency to do that sometimes, like really overthinking lyrics, and instead just try to write what's ever on my mind and try to make it sound as good as possible. And yeah, I mean, for this album, I wrote a lot of some personal stuff and some not personal stuff, and just trying to keep it fresh and do whatever keeps me inspired.
Yeah, I was definitely going to say, I definitely feel that the more that I listen to the album, it does feel very personal on the vocal and lyrical routes on a lot of the songs, and it's cool to see that, because the music is usually so high energy, but just like on the more mellow songs, you can really hear the emotion and power that's going on with your vocals.
Oh, that's great. I mean, that's what I've always wanted to do, and I guess that's what most lyricists aspire to do, is to be able to reach out with a certain type of emotion or whatever it is you want it to be, and so if that's the case, then I'm super happy. I mean. Personal lyrics can sometimes become too personal. I just fine line between keeping it a bit too abstract or just hitting that perfect spot where it's relatable for other people, but at the same time it means something to yourself as a lyricist as well.
So when it comes to the title of the album, Titanic Mass, does that have any personal meaning to you, or how did that title come about?
Well, that song in particular isn't very personal for me. I mean, it's something, the lyrics on that song are generally about a group of people, which I'm not a part of. But the title, I think, was it felt like something really strong, and like a group of people who are very strong in their spirit, so to speak. And so the title for the song was Titanic Mass, and when we started discussing possible album titles, Titanic Mass was a title that everybody in the band felt could be really strong and really conveying the message of the album as well. So after a while, after a little discussion, it was a no-brainer to everybody in the band to have that title. Yeah,
and it's a great title, and I think it really does describe the album in a great way as well, because it does have this huge sound behind it, whether it's the syncopated rhythms or the very melodic and catchy choruses. It just feels like a monumental album.
Yeah, I like I said, everybody felt like the album title conveyed the album perfectly, or described the album perfectly, and so I think it feels pretty good and pretty spot on, I would say.
So what would you say the songs on the album that mean most to you?
Well, there are plenty of songs. If you're meaning via lyrics or the song as a whole,
or any way you want to describe it.
Okay, I mean there are plenty of lyrics that are pretty personal, like I said, and I mean I Want to Live Forever, or The Smoking Gun, or let me see, The Human Paradox as well. But all of the songs have, you know, big meaning as far as songwriting goes. You've been a part of it for a long time, and you have this relationship with the songs, and they even some of the songs that aren't necessarily your favorite, you have a strong relationship to because you've spent a lot of time with them, and some songs take longer than others, so and you feel a sense of greatness after being able to finish a song that you never thought would finished. So it's really difficult to like pick out a few songs that are even more special than others, because you've spent a lot of time working on all of them, basically.
Oh, that definitely makes a lot of sense. Of course, with the album just coming out on Friday, have you had much of a chance to hear the audience reception to the album yet?
Well, there's always you see the reviews and you see what people write on the internet, but you can't possibly this early see all of the reactions. But it seems like everybody's really liking this album, and getting a great response here in Sweden as well. And people seem to be really spirited about the album. So yeah, it feels really good.
Well, I'm glad to hear it, because I definitely think it's an album that deserves all of the hopeful praise that it's going to be getting once more people get a chance to buy it and check it out.
I think so, and it seems like a lot of people are. I mean, we sort of divided the fan base that we had with the last album. A lot of our older fans really liked the change and accepted it, and some people were naturally not gonna like it, and we knew that. But from what I see now, a lot of the fans who didn't like Renatus, for example, likes a lot of the songs on the new album as well. So a lot of them are coming back, which is great. I don't really understand why, because I think it's a natural follow-up to the latest album. But yeah, I think it looks really good.
I guess I can kind of see that from a fan point of view, that maybe that they're just used to the new sound that you guys are doing now, that they're actually willing to give you guys a chance. So with the last album, that they kind of feel hurt a bit because they weren't playing the style that they knew you for, but now that you guys are continuing in this style, they're actually willing to give you guys a chance and realize that the music is actually really good.
Probably, yeah. I mean, we might have been a bit of a shock with the last album, so by now maybe a lot of them has accepted it, or given the last album a lot more chances and listening to it and really settled with the change. I don't know, but yeah, I mean, you're probably right. It can take some time, I suppose. Really, and I try to, for me it's like I always stay very open. If a band wants to try something different, or if a new album is different, I don't prejudge that like before I've heard it. Like, for instance, have you heard the new Dream Theater album?
I have, yes.
Yeah, did you like it?
It's funny because that came out the Friday that I was moving into a new apartment, so at the time that I finally got to buy it, I didn't have too much time to be able to listen to it. At first, it was a bit of as it was, but when I gave it more of a chance after a few spins, I really started to see where they were going with it, with the theme and the overall story, and I think it could really translate well live.
Yeah, I mean, that was, I suppose a lot of Dream Theater fans were a bit shocked by that album, even though they tried to like prepare their fan base with that this would be a very different album. And I completely agree with you. The first time I heard it, I was a bit lost. I didn't really understand it and didn't really connect with it. But you know, I always applaud bands when they try to do something different, and I really like this effort of trying to do something. I mean, they've released, I don't know how many albums, 14, 15 albums or something like that, and you know, why not trying to keep things fresh by doing something different? So I guess what I'm trying to say is that I don't judge something that's different before I really gave it a lot of shots in trying to enjoy it. Because if somebody needs to do something in order to stay creative, then it might be for the better, especially in the long run.
Oh, very much so. And Dream Theater is a great example of that, being my favorite band ever since I started getting into progressive music. And one thing I've always loved about them was there was so many different style changes with them. Like, they didn't just stick to being heavy or melodic or mellow. They had so many different aspects to them, and that helped me to appreciate other forms of music that Dream Theater either aspired from, or people enjoyed them, or whatever the case may be. And in going into this conversation now with Dynazty, you know, I have the appreciation of the older material and the newer material because of a band like Dream Theater that helped me open my mind and my ears to being able to appreciate other forms of music rather than just one style that I would listen to.
Yeah, I think definitely Dream Theater. I mean, every album they do is different from the previous one. So they certainly have that effect. And as a Dream Theater fan myself, like you said, it's definitely something that has opened my mind to different styles as well, because they're very, I mean, you would pin them down as a progressive metal band, but there are so many more influences, like everything from pop and really old progressive music to very metal music and thrash metal and everything. So, yeah, I mean, I always try to keep an open mind. When an artist feels like doing something different, I'm not one to judge it prematurely. It might be great.
Oh,
just to be able to keep creative and fresh.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it can go both ways, too, where a band tries to do something different and you may be hesitant about it first, and then that album will help you listen to a style of music that you may not necessarily enjoy until that artist does it, or a style of music that you never would associate with that band, and then they are able to pull it off. And sometimes it works in the other way too, where they go into territories that you just aren't enjoying. But the great thing about music is that there's so much different music out there of pretty much any style that you can think of, that there's no reason to be upset with a band because they change forms, because there's so much out there that you could appreciate if you just look for it. Yeah, and you should always try to at least give it a few tries before you condemn it into being something that you do not enjoy. Because there's always this period if there's something very different that you have to get used to it. So, yeah, I mean, it's just keep an open mind and try not to judge things too quickly, I suppose. And I mean, today in the day and age of the internet, where people are just one click away from changing the song, I guess that's harder than it was back in the days, I suppose. Oh yeah, I mean, that's the huge thing between the digital age and the physical age when it comes to music, because when you go out and buy the physical album, whether it be from the vinyl, cassette, CD, whatever the case is, you have that physical format, you put your money into that. Yeah, exactly. And even if you don't like it, you still want to give it more of a chance because you put your money into it, your physical money into going into a music store to pick up that album. Yeah, and you spend time. I mean, not just money. You spend time going to the music store. You spend time going home, and then you start listening to it. It's like an investment. And I remember when I grew up buying CDs, there were plenty of CDs that I didn't like the first time I listened to it. But I kept listening, and maybe at the third or fourth try, I started really appreciating it, and that's when you broaden your taste for music. And sometimes you bought an album and you tried it 5 times and it still didn't do anything for you. Well, then that's just life. You can't like everything, but at least you gave a lot of things, a lot of chances, and because you had spent money and time and effort into buying that. And unfortunately, that's somewhat gone for a lot of people who are listening to music today. It's too easy to, like, if a song with a band doesn't please you within the first 40 seconds of the song, then you go to something else. Yeah, and that's the thing, again, with the digital age, whether you're streaming music or you buy it online, you're not handing physical money to a music store or to a band at a show. You're buying the MP3 version, or you're streaming it on YouTube or Spotify or whatever the case is. So if you're not necessarily enjoying something, you can, like, instantly click to a new song or click to a new band. Yeah. So that aspect's kind of lost, especially in the album sense, because again, with the physical format, it makes you want to listen to the album from start to finish because you actually saw your money being transferred to get that album. Yeah, and I mean, obviously, the hard rock bands of today still put out albums that are meant to be listened from start to finish. I mean, I don't think that we're still in that
the hard rock bands are still traditional in the sense that if they release an album, they want it to be like you listen from start to finish. The fifth song is there for a reason, you know. And I think that's also a bit somewhat sad today, that a lot of people just create their own playlists or whatever, and if they like maybe one song, then they play that song. And, I mean, that's like watching a few scenes out of a whole movie.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great way to put it. I mean, I've always been an album guy. When a band is putting out a collection of songs, whether it's an EP or a full release or like Dream Theater, a double album, I want to give the entire thing a listen and try to appreciate everything that's on the release, because the band put that much time and effort into putting it out. I want to give it the time and effort to be able to listen to it and see if I enjoy it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the way the artist intended the music to be listened to, so I would always want to listen to it that way. I mean, there's always a purpose for the way the songs are orchestrated or put together, and I mean, that's the way it's supposed to be listened to, so I always try to do that, but I also realize that that's just not the way that a lot of people are listening to it nowadays. I mean, things are changing, and well, there's not any stopping it really, even though you can be as nostalgic about it as you want, but the truth is that, well, things have changed, and I don't think there's any going back to the way things were 25, 30 years ago, unfortunately.
Yeah, unless something colossal changes in the music industry, you are right. I mean, things have changed so much with music being so accessible where you don't even need to illegally download anything. Everything's just available on services like YouTube and Spotify, and the bands don't necessarily get a good share of money from those streams either. So it just makes it easier for the fans to be able to check out, and you gotta hope for those fans that are able to discover a band through those services and want to give their money to be able to actually buy the album so they can listen to it anytime they want to in any formats and be able to see the band live as well.
Yeah. I mean, there are certainly a lot of possibilities also with the digital age that just wasn't there 25, 30 years ago. There are a lot of ways for a completely unknown band to get attention just through YouTube or whatever. So there are definitely positive aspects of the whole thing as well. And I mean, if somebody listens to something on Spotify, maybe they like it, they'll go out and watch the band live and maybe buy the CD or a T-shirt or whatever and become a fan. So it's not all just just darkness with the internet age. I mean, there are, of course, a lot of good stuff about it as well.
Oh, very much so. And a great example of that is the bands that go out and try to do the crowdsourcing, because that's a good representation of how much the fan base is willing to put their money into supporting the music that they love.
Yeah, sure. And it seems to work. I mean, the crowdfunding thing is beautiful. And I mean, that's probably something that will evolve and continue evolving. I can't see. That is one thing that I suppose the music industry is doing to accept this change and to go with the change instead of trying to work against it.
Yeah, and I hope it happens that way too, because with the industry, with the labels, I still find them to be very valuable for the growth of a band, because they help so much with the advertising and getting a band's name out there, just as much as a band doing a crowdsourcing, being able to get their name out that way, and then having the crowd do most of the advertising work for them. But with the labels, I mean, they put so much time and effort into helping out the bands as well. So it would be nice to see kind of growth to where a band could maybe do both to get the best example of how the band could grow.
Yeah, sure.
So we were talking a little bit ago about a band putting out an album and a reason for there being the tracks on an album that there are. Was there any particular meaning into having the track listing of Titanic Mass the way it is from start to finish?
Not any more than trying to be as dynamic as possible and trying to making it become listenable. Like if you want to listen from start to finish, you don't have the 5 heaviest songs in a row or whatever. But there aren't no any big meanings with the songs. with the track list, other than it being as dynamic as possible.
And that's a great way to do it as well, because you don't want to have an album become too heavy on one side and then too mellow at the rest of it, or vice versa. Being able to keep that diversity going the way that it definitely sounds on the new album is a great way to do it.
Yeah, you want to keep the listener's ears fresh throughout the whole album, basically, and you try to keep the song dynamics really flowing in a natural way, and not, yeah, like you said, not making it too heavy in one spot and too soft in another.
Oh, very much so. So, how do you feel that the songs are going to translate live from the new album?
I think they'll translate. We'll try it tomorrow. Some of the songs, we're premiering some of the songs tomorrow night, actually, and it's going to be a lot of fun. But I'm quite sure that they'll come off great live. It's just something that you're starting to get a feel for when you write the songs nowadays. After you've done 5 albums, you start to feel like, wow, this is going to sound great live. And sometimes it surprises you. Some of the songs, I remember one of my favorite tracks from our Sultans of Sin album is a track called More Than a Man, which I thought would be, this should be great live. But then when we actually got out to play it, it just didn't really translate that well into a live setting. So it can definitely surprise you sometimes, but I mean, when you play a song like Titanic Mass in the rehearsal room, you really feel the energy there, and you really feel like, well, this is going to work great with an audience.
And that kind of reminds me of, we talked about in the beginning about like the change in the band and the shock that came from the fans of the beginning of the band may or may not like the new style that you guys are doing. Has that ever happened vice versa, where a band only knew you for the last album, then they went to see you live and had a bit of a shock when they found out that you guys were doing a different style?
Definitely, yeah. That has happened a lot, actually. Like, I've only heard your last album, and then I went to see you live, and then I looked back and checked out your other albums, and I was completely surprised. And they, of course, want to know the story about the change as well. So, yeah, I've seen that happen, definitely.
Well, again, it's cool to see that, because it shows that the band the fans don't just want to stick to one album from a band. They want to do it like I do. Like when I discover a band, I want to go out and buy the whole discography and see everything that the band's gone through, whether it's a band that sticks to the same formula or a band that changes their sound drastically, or the one that I always try to gravitate to the most is the band putting out the right album at the right time for what feels most important to the band at that time. And again, you guys are doing that so well this time around.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's only natural if you're a fan of music, or if you're a fan of a band that you want to see what this band is doing and what they have been doing, and I think that's also a great way that really shows you that you're appreciating music and that you're a band if you take time to really look into what they have been doing for the last couple of years, or their earlier stuff, and you're interested in seeing why they did that album at that time and so on. I think that's a testament of being a true fan of music and a true fan of a band.
Oh, very much so. So going back in the last year with Prog Power USA, unfortunately you guys hit a snag and you were not able to perform there, and that would have been my first time being able to see you guys after discovering you guys. Is there any talks about hitting North America again?
Yeah, sure. Especially the Prog Power. We'll be back there as soon as possible. At least that's what we're talking about. Like you said, it was a very unfortunate event that made it impossible for us to play at the Prog Power, which was really sad. But we'll be back there as soon as possible. And there's also plans of hitting North America in other territories as well. We just have to see when and where and how.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, Prog Power was my first time going to Prog Power last year, and for me that was about a 16-hour drive to make it there. So if you guys ever hit North America and I don't have to drive 16 hours to be able to see you guys, I would definitely appreciate that.
Okay, so where do you live?
I live in a state called Minnesota, which is in the northern part of the country.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so hopefully we'll be able to do a proper tour of the States sometime in the future. that's at least one of our goals. So we'll make it happen sooner or later. I think so.
Oh, very cool. So earlier you mentioned that you were checking out the latest album from Dream Theater. Was there any other albums that have come out this year that you've gotten a chance to listen to?
This year, let's see. It's always no. The new Symphony X was released last year.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that was. Let me think about it. Not any that I can remember right now if it was released this year or last year, but I mean, I try to keep updated as much as possible, and I have lots of favorite bands that I always check out, and try to find as many new bands as possible. Even though it's getting increasingly harder sometimes for me to find new bands.
I've kind of noticed that too. I mean, with the digital age, there's so much opportunity for new bands that may have never had a chance before to be able to go out there and show what they're capable of. But also at the same time, there's so much out there that sometimes you don't even know where to begin.
Exactly. I think that's the problem. It really is that there's just so much. So where do you begin, and where do you find it? Because you usually just stick with what you know. And but I do try to find some new stuff and really broaden my my span of musical listening.
So with that said, what was just out of curiosity, what was the last band that you discovered that had like an impact in what you listened to?
Well, the last band was probably, do you know Tesseract?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and I heard their new album, and I hadn't heard them before, and I was really impressed. It was really something that really hit home, really atmospheric and really groovy prog metal. Really cool stuff.
Oh, very much so. Just getting back a little bit more into Titanic Mass, was there anything that was written for the album, whether it be like riffs or full songs that didn't make the album that could appear in the future sometime?
Sure. We usually work though. If we have an idea that we're not very sure about, we very rarely finish that song. We move on to something else. But there are plenty of riffs and plenty of choruses or verses that are still, that we will probably review again once we start writing new material, because that's what we did with a lot of the stuff that were left from the last album, Renatus. There are actually a few things on the new album that are straight out of unused stuff from Renatus as well.
Oh, very cool. Well, if there's any of that stuff that will be coming up in the future, and anything else that you guys have got going on, I'm definitely going to be looking forward to it.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for taking the time to do this interview. I've been a huge fan since I discovered the last album and going back and buying the rest of your discography, and hopefully sometime in the near future being able to see you guys in North America. Thank you for the great music and the great new album, Titanic Mass. Before we go, is there anything else that you'd like to mention that I haven't brought up yet?
No, you've covered it all, and thanks for taking the time, and thanks for checking out our music and being a fan. And we'll definitely try to hit America as soon as possible.